Welcome back. You're watching Commodity Champions. We now shift focus to the growing silver market. The Silver Institute released a survey for 2024. The report highlights that for the third year in a row, demand has massively exceeded supply in 2023. It also forecasts demand to rise to 1.2 billion ounces in 2024, which, if achieved, would be the second highest level recorded. Earlier, I spoke to Phillips S. Baker Jr., the chairman of Silver Institute and the president and CEO of Hecla Mining. Listen. Gold and silver, almost everything seems to be running up right now. While gold is making all-time highs globally, silver in India has made an all-time high. We're trading at around 88,000 rupees per kg here. How have you seen the dynamics, the fundamentals change in case of silver in last 3 or 6 months?
Well, what's been amazing with silver is the demand that's happened for photovoltaics. It has completely changed silver. If you go back and look at where it was a decade ago, we're now using 3 times as much silver now as we were a decade ago. And it's just continuing to grow year after year.
And would you say that the current prices justify the kind of demand that we're looking at?
Yeah, in fact, I would expect, given the deficits that we've had for the last 3 years, it's almost 500 million ounces globally is how much we've consumed. It's going to go higher. It's going to go a lot higher. We're going to see silver in U.S. dollar terms above the highest price that it's ever seen, which is just a little less than double where it is today.
Phil, we all keep discussing on how silver is also an industrial metal now. Its usage from solar to EVs to laptops to smartphones, etc., only seems to be growing from here. How would you look at the global industrial demand, and how would you look at India picturing in within that demand sector?
Well, within the industrial demand, India is not really a driver of it at this point. It's starting to grow. We're starting to see that, but around the rest of the world, it has grown dramatically because silver has these unique characteristics that no other metal has. And as a result of that, you can see it in the EVs that you mentioned. That growth has been dramatic. As the EVs have grown, so has silver.
So, how have you seen the global industrial demand grow on a year-on-year basis? I mean, I was reading the Silver Institute report. It does say that the last 3 years were record numbers, and that is the expectation for this year too.
Yeah, so last year in just China alone, the demand for silver for industrial purposes grew about 60%. The driver of that was really the photovoltaics. It takes not quite 500 million ounces of silver for a gigawatt of solar power. And last year, 444 gigawatts was what was installed around the world. So that was, right at 200 million ounces. So that growth that's happening industrial is really the underlying driver of maintaining the silver price and really being the driver for it going higher.
So when you look at the overall silver demand globally, where on the map do you see India? How much of a contribution does India put? And a couple of years ago, we did see record imports into India. Last year, we haven't been able to match up to it, but the markets do estimate that this year could be a 6,000 tons of imports still coming in.
Well, it's interesting when you look at the demand for silver in India for jewelry purposes primarily. Year before last, it was the most in history. Last year, it came down, but it was still the second most. So it was while it was a dramatic decline, it was still the second most. And India is it's roughly 16% of worldwide demand. Demand's about 1.2 billion ounces. India makes up 16% of that. And it's just continuing to grow. I mean, one of the things that we're aware of is we need to be helping inform investors that silver is one of the places they need to put their investments.
So, Phil, with the kind of demand estimates that are being put out, and then with the kind of production estimates that are being put out, what is the kind of mismatch that we see continuing going forward in the years to come?
Well, production of silver, the company I work for, we're actually the largest producer of silver in the United States. We produce almost half of all the silver that's mined in the U.S. And we should in the next year or two be about 40% of all the silver produced in Canada. And what we're seeing is very, very flat supply growth. It's almost non-existent. As a result of that, you're going to have to take silver that's already been mined in order to meet the demands that we currently have. Over the last 3 years, it's been about 500 million ounces that we've had to take from existing supply. So when you start to look at the above ground stocks, it is declining. In China, it declined 73% in the last year. That's going to continue to happen until you see higher prices that you then can justify building new mines.
And newer mines, when do you think they would find it in their favor to starting up?
Well, look, it's going to take significantly higher prices because the projects are big. In order to build a silver mine, you're talking somewhere around $500 million to multi-billions of dollars. And even then, the sort of production that you're talking about is quite small. It's remarkable when you look at the supply. The top 30 companies only make up about 30% of the total supply of silver. And you then compare that to demand, and you're less than 20% of what's demanded. So you're going to need a lot higher prices in order to justify the capital necessary to put those new mines into production. And you've got to discover them. And from discovery to production, currently it's taking about 20 years for that to happen.
So how higher from here are we looking at in sense of silver prices for it to turn profitable to somebody to start investing in a silver mine?
It changes. There's no two deposits are exactly alike, so it's hard to make an estimate of that. I would just suggest to you that it's going to take silver in US dollar terms that are approaching, certainly at the levels that you saw in 2011 and 12, which were close to $40 an ounce. It's going to take those sort of prices and higher in order to make any significant impact in supply.
Phil, how important do you see as an India market for silver going forward? How important, what kind of a demand growth are we looking here for the years to come?
Well, in India, I'm just struck by what a dynamic market it is and how it's changed so much over the course of the last 15 years or so. And so as a result of that, this is one of the places that you should see significant increase in demand and an opportunity for people that really have not looked at silver to really consider it as an investment choice, as a financial investment choice.
All right. As a part of portfolio as well, silver really seems to be getting there because while, of course, Indians buy a lot of physical silver, but we also have a silver ETF. There is silver that you can buy digitally as well. Right. So there are various ways of owning it and including it in your portfolio. But even more interestingly, how are you looking at the silver mines do right now? You being one of the largest ones, is there a lot of hedging that you are doing in sense of prices and production?
No, we really don't hedge much, and neither do the other producers. We'll hedge the other metals that we produce, but not silver and not gold. It's both of those are on a trajectory that you don't want to be short.
Oh, absolutely that. Also, when you look at the global demand numbers from here on, I mean, we've done 1 billion ounces and more. Are you looking at that trajectory to continue as well? Yeah, and what numbers are you looking for?
Yeah, so we're right at 1.2 billion ounces of silver. You certainly can see this growing easily in a 5 to 10% growth per year on average over the course of the next decade. And what drives that is really the photovoltaics. If you go back 10 years ago, it was 50 million ounces. Today, it's 200 million ounces. Wouldn't be surprised if you look at what people are projecting for solar. Wouldn't be surprised to see that number at 1.4, 1.5 billion ounces of silver. Almost as much silver as there are people in India.
Oh, yes. So, Phil, you told me before we started talking that you worked with gold and you worked with silver as well. What is it that differentiates, apart from the pricing part, of course, because while gold is a safe haven, silver does tend to fall, but isn't exactly a safe haven. So how would you look at the characteristics, one? And there is this huge talk about gold and silver ratio at all times. What sense do you make of that?
Yeah, so silver is an interesting metal because it has both industrial characteristics and monetary characteristics, and that's never going to change. You will always have this monetary component to silver, but the big difference is silver, about 55% of it gets used for these industrial purposes. You know, what I think it does is it gives you really kind of the best of both worlds. Mm-hmm. And in terms of that gold-silver ratio, what makes more sense is sort of the historical average, which is about 50, and we're currently at 83. So if you think about where silver can go in US dollar terms, pretty dramatic.
Oh, it is. Phil, thank you so much for joining us.